Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Total Saints podcast. This is our weekly get-together where we discuss the last 7 days following Southampton Football Club. We're live streaming our podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the channel to be the first to see all of our new videos. As always, a massive thank you to our TSP patrons who make all of this possible. You can visit patreon.com/Total Saints podcast to find out more about getting involved. And thanks to our sponsors once again this week, Pundit Games. Pundit is the new card-based football trivia game that you can play anywhere. You can play as a group or just in a pair. Rounds last around 45 minutes and there's 900 questions to get through across various categories like 90s Premier League, the Three Lions and the World Cup, to name but a few. Pundit are offering TSP listeners 20% off their purchase when they use the code SAINTS. Head to punditgames.co.uk and you'll be able to enter the code as you check out. And you'll also find a link to the website and the code in the YouTube and podcast description. So coming up this week on the podcast, we won a game at home and we kept a clean sheet and we complete another double, this time over Leicester, but we rode our luck at times, so we'll get into that. And just when you thought the season couldn't get any worse, there was a midweek defeat to League Two side Grimsby Town in the FA Cup. Again, plenty to discuss there. Plus our panel of guests are going to preview the trip to Manchester United at the weekend. My name's Martin Starke, and I'm joined this week by Steve Grant, the owner of SaintsWeb. Glen Cour is the writer of the blog League 1-10, and Jacob Tanswell is the Southampton reporter for The Athletic. All underpinned by our TSP patrons. This is episode 224 of the Total Saints podcast. So Saints moved off the bottom of the Premier League for the first time since the World Cup break with a vital 1-0 win over Leicester at St Mary's. Glenn, I'll start with you. A massive win, but for me, we were very, very lucky. Leicester could have scored 2 or 3 goals. How were your nerves watching that one?
I kind of watch the game in a kind of resigned state of mind these days. So I don't get too, in the words of Nigel Atkins, don't get too high, don't get too low. Draw a blue line under it, move on after the game. Yeah, it was a bit it was a bit nervy the last half an hour because we kind of gave up completely on attacking, and I dread to think what the possession stats were for the last half an hour, but it felt like about 95%, and I got eye strain because I was at the chapel end and the ball spent the entire last half an hour up the other end. So yeah, it was a bit of a tough watch the last half an hour, sort of hoping we get to the end. We've had plenty of games in the past where we've missed chances and the opposition have, I mean, I'm thinking Newcastle at home this season. You know, we had chances, didn't take them. They took their chances and the game was over. And that's the way Leicester will be looking at it. They had their chances. They didn't get a single shot on target. You know, on another day, we could easily be sitting here discussing a 3-1 defeat where we left a striker free in the box 3 times and that was the end of that. But, you know, we got away with it, courtesy of the guy who I said was half decent last week. So I have to totally put my hands up. I still think he is decent, but he had a shocking game yesterday. So, yeah, I thought, you know, first 20 minutes were a bit odd. We didn't really do much there. And then for 20 minutes, we looked like a proper team. We carried an attacking threat, mainly through Alcaraz, who I thought was a revelation in that position. I thought he was excellent. Always looking to have a shot, always looking to be positive. Got the penalty, missed that. In the past, that would have been the signal for us to kind of get all down about things. But we kept going and got the goal straight after that. Just the way things are going at the moment, I felt sure it was going to get disallowed by a VAR. So, you know, it's nice that it wasn't. But yeah, the second half was tough and we had to, there was some good defending in there, but I think you can say you've defended well if you've not allowed any chances. I don't think we defended particularly brilliantly because we did allow those chances that on another day would have seen us lose again. But at the end of the day, the end justified the means. We got to the end. We got the 3 points. And I don't know if you've seen Theo Walcott's interview on the club website. It's really good, actually, where he basically says it's all about the results, and he's dead right.
Yeah, I think perhaps he might have said something similar as well. Steve, you've had a chance to sleep on that result. How are you feeling about it today?
I mean, it's a massive 3 points, isn't it? I mean, we're now sort of right back in the mix. only a point off of sort of teams above the dotted line. So yeah, it can't be seen as anything other than a positive weekend, especially the way all the other results have fallen pretty nicely for us. I mean, Bournemouth being 2 up and throwing it away at Arsenal in the 98th minute was
a shame. It was a shame, wasn't it?
Oh, my heart bleeds for them. But yeah, I mean that was kind of a sign of how things might pan out, I suppose, over the weekend for us. I mean, let's be honest, we've had enough weekends where every single result's gone the opposite way. So you take these weekends when they present themselves. I thought we were. I mean, first half I thought we were fine. First 20 we were kind of feeling our way into it. Leicester looked a little bit more likely, but I mean, as the stats state, not a shot on target in 96 minutes. 100 minutes, given that we had a fair few added at the end of the first half. And at the end of the day, they seem to be so reliant on Maddison.
Yeah.
He was good, I thought, but he was good in areas where he wasn't actually useful. In many respects, he was dropping deep a lot to collect the ball to feet. Which we were quite happy for him to do, because as long as he's not 25 yards from goal in the centre, then okay, you can deal with it. And yeah, I thought we despite the fact that obviously there were a few crosses into the box that, as Glen said, on another day Iheanacho probably gets 2 headers, and I think it was Wout Fass, wasn't it, who somehow managed to head one from a corner, probably back closer to the corner flag than the near post, from a free header. And I mean, on another day those go in, but yesterday wasn't that other day, and we got away with it. We've had loads of games where we miss those presentable chances and we get punished. So swings and roundabouts, you kind of take the balance with it, and yeah, just kind of suck up the glory, I suppose,
and move on. Yeah, I'm certainly enjoying these positive podcasts. It's been a while since we've had a few results like this. Yeah.
Well, let's give us 5 minutes until we start on Wednesday.
Jacob, we were all pretty critical of the team after that Leeds game last week. So what made the difference for you against Leicester? Where was that game won? What were the differences?
I think Ruben Sellers, I think he's been one of the more positive aspects of Southampton's season. I think what is good about him is that he incorporates some of Harsental's strengths, but also he knows that he's a little bit more flexible than him. I think he realised, especially against Grimsby, that the whole system was too narrow, everything was too slow. Saints aren't the greatest at passing through the lines anyway. So he brought in these 2 wingers in Walcott and Sulemana, and I thought the runs they made in that first half especially were quite clever. There's one incident, I think, where Ainsley Maitland-Niles had the ball and Walcott went to show to feet and then span in behind, and they won a corner and I think handball appeal, and I thought that was really sharp, and it just spoke of the threat that 4-2-3 on posed. And then Alcaraz as well, he's always been better without the ball really in terms of making those forward runs into the box. All of his goals at River Plate were like that. So it didn't surprise me, that type of goal, and I think Sellers knows how to get the best out of him, and I think this is now going to be the formula, this personnel as well, that are going to stick till the end of the season. I think you've seen it's quite clear with James Breen and Doozy playing for the B team, Saleta, Sarr and Orsic now. I think they're going to be hooked out for the long term. That this is the group of players, the nucleus of the squad that's going to be selected. And I think Shea Adams was coming back in. I think that's a massive boost as well, because I know he gets maligned a lot, misses chances, but he's not the guy that's there to be the out and out number 9, the goal scorer. He's always been better as a link-up player, having a foil, and him and Alcaraz, I thought, dovetailed really well in and out of possession. And you saw with the goal, I think that pass was fantastic. And it goes with the cliche. I think it was the Kevin De Bruyne or sub there. I think match of the day we've been talking about a lot more.
Let's just talk about that goal and that pass. But it all started, Glenn, with that tackle from Lavia, who I thought had a really good game again yesterday. He wins the ball back and gets things moving yesterday.
Yeah, he does. And I thought he was excellent. And I thought he was one of the few that played well against Grimsby as well. He, he seems to be getting back into his rhythm now after his injury. And, we have to hope and look after him, and have to hope that he lasts to the end of the season. Because, we desperately need him. We're desperately reliant on this 19-year-old kid to stay fit and stay performing the way he is. And the chances are, whether we go up or whether we go down, these will be the last 13 games he plays for us. So in order to give us any chance of keeping him next year, we have to stay up, and he will play a massive part in that if we manage it, because he does the job that no one else in our squad is capable of doing. Not, it's funny, there was Nathan Jones, wasn't it, who said he's not particularly good defensively. Well, I don't really see that, and that was a good example. That tackle that he put in to win the ball to start the move. That's that's as good as anyone does in that position. So I have it's interesting because he seemed to get a bit of criticism off of Ruben Sellers during the week. Maybe Jacob will talk about that in a minute, but I don't really see it. I hope it was just a case of trying to keep his feet on the ground, because the kid's got everything, and he will be. He's a good player. He's a really good Premier League player already, and he's going to be something else if he develops the way he should do. So I thought he had another excellent game, and he's the sort of player that allows other players to play as well.
He enjoyed the win as well. That's for sure. Jacob, do you just want to touch on that those comments? Because we were kind of following your Twitter commentary, I think, as we probably do on a Friday, those of us that are at work, from the press conference and some of the things that Sellers is coming out of. And obviously he was critical of Lavia. And at the time we thought, well, maybe this might just be a little lost in translation. But I know that you had the chance to delve a little deeper with that.
Yeah, a piece has just gone on the Athletic now about that, because I found it curious, because it was the last question that Sky asked in the broadcast section, and it was basically just an opportunity for Sellers to, it's an easy win just to expand and tell everyone how good Lavia is, what a player, how we signed for 12 million, and he's going to be a really good player. But then he gave this short answer where he's not impressed. So I asked Ruben about it, and he went on for about 90 seconds, 2 minutes, and he started talking about how he wants him to dominate games and how he needs to keep his feet on the ground. And I think when you read it and you really analyze his comments, I think it's because he wants Southampton, or Sellers wants Southampton, to be better in possession, to not sink deep like they did in the last 20 minutes against Leicester. He wants them to have more control, and it didn't matter so much under Jones, because Jones basically bypassed the midfield a lot of the time. But I think Sellers recognises with 3 open play goals in 10 games pre-Leicester that Southampton have to carry more of a threat. They have to implement more patterns of play. And the way to do that is through sustaining attacks and keeping the ball. And Lavia is the best at keeping the ball. So although, he's nice and pretty and he garnishes games, Sellers wants him to make a bigger impact. And he's got 0 assists this season. He's got 1 goal, I think. Sellers wants big, impactful moments from Lavia, and although he's fantastic at getting out of tight pockets, how much of that really impacts the game on the scoreline? And I think that's one of the things that Ruben wanted, and I think we saw that in the first half. That tackle, like Glen and Steve said, was excellent, and it was overlooked at the time, but when you watch it back, you see how significant that was. And those are the type of examples that I think Ruben was alluding to in his presser.
Do you think it was a fair comment, Steve? I think with Nathan Jones, perhaps the comments in the press conferences were so often about him that anything about the players were overlooked. So maybe they didn't stand out. But I know that you and I were like, what? What's he on about?
It certainly seemed odd for those, because obviously the way these press conferences work, we get to see what happens in the broadcast press conference, but we've got no idea what happens in the written one, and it's all embargoed until like later that evening, so we don't hear for hours about what's been said in the follow-up. Like immediately following the following that press conference, it was a case of, well, I mean, is he kind of sort of just said something that made sense to him in Spanish and it's just not translated very well, or has he actually just said no? I've not been impressed by him. Was it literally as clear cut as that? And I think ultimately the answer is probably somewhere kind of vaguely in the middle, but varying sort of more towards him actually not being overly impressed. But I think it's more that he sees how much ability and potential the kid's got already. At such a tender age, with such little first team senior experience, that he thinks that actually he should be able to kind of demonstrate this ability on a more consistent basis.
Glenn, I want to talk about the other end of the experience scale, as it were. Start for Theo Walcott yesterday. Kind of felt like he earned that and offered a bit more, maybe sort of the leadership and the experience. He was one of the few people that came out of Wednesday night with a bit of respect still intact, perhaps. Oh, he's on mute.
Mute, Glenn.
Amateur hour. Sorry, I got cold. He was he came on as a sub in the Grimsby game, and he was absolutely excellent when he came on. I thought he demonstrated the long lost art of a player in a Southampton shirt darting into space to receive the ball, and he did that a lot yesterday as well. There was like the penalty stemmed from a 1-2 that he played as we worked it out the pitch. The early sort of run down the line of Maitland-Niles was the same as well. And I thought he had a really good game, and I thought it was a shame they took him off. I thought the substitutions were absolute murder, to be honest. I don't know if we're going to talk about that.
Oh yeah,
my word! I just basically it took off. Walcott was one of our better performing players, and taking him off, he didn't look tired.
Well, no, he literally just sprinted from halfway back 30 yards to put in a challenge. Yeah.
So I thought he played really well. He played well against Grimsby. If you play well in that game, no one can really argue if you get put in the Premier League team. And he did really well. And it's a good story that he's been miles from a first team place over the last sort of year or so, and he's worked his way back in. I mean, you could argue whether that's down to poor options in that position and other players performing poorly, but he did well, and he got in the team and he played well yesterday. So I hope he stays in the team next week because he deserves it. And it's we talk about him being an example to other players, and it's a great example that no matter how far you are from the first team at various points, if you can put the performances in training and make the most of it when you get your 20-minute substitute appearance or whatever, then great. It's just a shame that it doesn't work the other way around when you've got players who absolutely stunk the place out on Wednesday, and they still get minutes on the pitch on Saturday, which it's a shame it doesn't work the other way around as well. But no, Theo, I thought was excellent, and as I said earlier on, his interview that's on the club website is really good as well. So top man, and hopefully he keeps going.
Yeah, because if we're going to stay up, then we're going to need his experience. Steve, just a word on James Ward-Prowse. Is it time for him to give penalties to somebody else? Because he never looks confident, does he? I think there's two he's missed this season, and there was the England one, and he normally scores the rebound, doesn't he? So he kind of masks over it. But yesterday, it wasn't brilliant, was it?
No, and it was, and the problem is, I think on the Sky coverage, I saw reference to it on Twitter, that on the Sky coverage, they obviously, just as the penalty's about to be taken, they put that sort of the plot of where he's hit his most recent 5 or 6 penalties, and basically every single one's in the same place. Keepers at Premier League level, even keepers I know of keepers at non-league level who do research on opposition penalty takers.
You don't need the post-it note on the back of the water bottle,
exactly,
do you, to know where that's going?
Yeah, exactly. So, Danny Ward is not a very good goalkeeper, and yet he knew exactly where Prowse was going to put that penalty and made a very comfortable save. He put enough power on it, but it was just so telegraphed where he's going to put it now.
Yeah.
And Prowse even joked himself in the post-match, didn't he? Oh, I'd rather have a free kick. It's like, well, there's your answer. If your captain's saying that, he absolutely should not be taking penalties now. In terms of candidates, Alcaraz strikes the ball pretty well. The finish for the goal, took it early, I think, which is what surprised Ward, which meant that he was kind of just stood there, not really able to react properly. So yeah, maybe Alcaraz is.
Has Carl Walker-Peters taken one before, or have I dreamt that up?
Don't think so. No.
Maybe it's free kicks.
Probably in a shootout, he's taken one.
I was thinking Maitland-Niles apparently. Penalty.
But yeah, other than that, Lavia possibly.
Sure. Alcaraz used to take free kicks for Racing Club. I'm sure some of his highlight reels were were sort of dead ball strikes. So
Well,
yeah,
taking free kicks is evidently not proof of
I
being at the top quality,
It
as we've just seen. So I don't know. I guess the issue is that there aren't obvious candidates in the current 11. I mean, you look a little bit deeper, and you might look at someone like Stu Armstrong. Tends to strike the ball quite well, and he's fairly composed, quite versatile. I mean, actually, I think Elyounoussi will probably be a good penalty taker. I think, weirdly,
he'd pass it
but
backwards.
It's just, I mean, there's no obvious candidate. Other than Prowse at the moment, until we've got somebody who's actually reliably sticking the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah.
Who do you choose to take a very obvious sort of free shot at goal, other than the only person who's found the back of the net in recent weeks?
Scored a few goals, yeah.
So there's no right answer until we until we get a striker who we know we can rely on.
I want to get on to those double changes, and I'll get Glen's view on this in just a moment when Armstrong and Mara came on. But Jacob, I know that Sellers was talking about this after the game, and just to kind of preempt, he was kind of sticking by his decision and almost justifying why those two came on after the poor performance on Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't actually mind the thinking behind it, because Leicester were leaving a lot of space. Suter's not the most mobile of defenders, is he? And I think in Siku Mara and Adam Armstrong, he thinks he can get better pressure from the front. If they press from the front, the whole team can get out of the pitch, stop them from dropping deep, whilst offering a threat in behind as well. So I did actually mind the thinking behind it. The issue is the optics, because of Wednesday, how bad those two were coming on. But also, I think it's a little bit too early. And in all of his games, he's made that double striking substitution. And I think if you just wait 5-10 minutes, I think fans can accept it a little bit more. But when you've got basically half an hour plus stoppage time to go, and you've got Siku Mara and Adam Armstrong on the pitch who don't really offer much in terms of hold-up play or are actually very ruthless in the first place, I think that's a struggle. I wouldn't mind bringing one of them on if you had Shea and Adam Armstrong. I think that would have been okay. But bringing both of them on is a risk. But Sellers clearly has his plan, and I think he's very reluctant to play Sulemana throughout. I think he still thinks he's bedding in, and these are decisions that he has to live and die by at the end of the day.
Is there an argument, Glen, to say that we're defending from the front and you change the front three because then they're fitter and they, I'm trying to justify this now, like lead the charge into the final half, or just not at all?
Well, I can see why he does it in the same way that I could see in the Chelsea game why he did it. He made he made the same substitutions. It was it was Onuachu, Sulemana and Armstrong all came off, didn't they? And around the same amount of time left in the game where we're 1-0 up. The issue is with it is that you're basically giving up on attacking, because we'd already had to take off Alcaraz and put Elyounoussi on. And I couldn't understand that substitution at that particular time. I'd have thought, as he's playing as a number 10, that's where Stuart Armstrong would be ideal. He seemed to be the better choice. But anyway, Elyounoussi on, and then to take off Adams and Walcott at the same time and bring on the Chuckle brothers was just we're not attacking anymore.
Surely the Chuckle brothers would imply that they're actually passing to each other, though.
Yeah, to me, to you, to them again, to me, to them, to me, to at the moon with a shot. Honestly, and as you touched upon, they were absolutely diabolical. The reason we lost to Grimsby, in my opinion, was the front four. So you add Orsic and Gineppo into that. Just shocking. They were, all four of them were absolutely shocking. So I was amazed that those two got on the pitch again. It's putting all your eggs in the basket of not conceding a goal. Because imagine if Leicester had scored 5 minutes after that, after that substitution had been made, and you're then looking at, well, what can we do to try and score another goal? And we've got that forward line. So that's what worries me. And I totally agree with Jacob's point for that reason, amongst others, is that if you leave it to 70, 75 minutes, when Adams is genuinely knackered, when Walcott is genuinely knackered, then I can kind of see it. But I didn't see the necessity for that change at the time. And for reasons that we've discussed earlier, okay, the end justifies the means because we got the 3 points. But I can't see that working too often. But having said that, it's worked twice in
It's worked
3 games.
two in the last
It's
3,
worked-
yeah.
Yeah, it's worked twice in 3 games. But I mean, if we try and do it next week against Man United, say for argument's sake, we're 1-0 up and we tried to defend for half an hour against Man United, I just don't see it working. So I think that tactic maybe needs tweaking a little bit. But there you go, we got there.
We did. We got there in the end. Steve, a couple more things I want to touch on before we move on. A clean sheet for Bazunu, which was great. He's not good for the nerves at the moment, is he? I know McCarthy played on Wednesday night. Were you surprised to see McCarthy not involved in the squad? I know, I don't know if you were watching, but like Willie Caballero seemed to be almost coaching from the sidelines at times and having a word with some of the younger players. It felt like maybe his role in the squad and on the bench perhaps is more than McCarthy, who might just sit there kicking his heels.
Yeah, potentially, but I think it does sound as if McCarthy might have had some sort of knock at the weekend, so he wasn't in the 20. So I mean, you take that kind of out of the equation, I guess. If we're now assuming that Caballero is basically there as the archetypal third choice keeper, never ever going to play, but is a great guy to have around for experience and presumably fantastic dressing room banter. But I mean, Bazunu, I mean, he will justify with a little bit of justification, say, well, I've had 2 clean sheets in the last 3 games that I've played, and yeah, I mean, you look at the raw numbers, and he's correct. But yeah, certainly, yesterday we looked. I mean, he looked a little bit shaky. I mean, he was given an absolute shocker of a back pass by Walker-Peters for that shanked clearance that went straight to Iheanacho. And I mean, everyone, like the guys near me in the Northern, were giving Bazunu an absolute volley for that. Which, I mean, yeah, he's not made the best of it, but he's been given an absolute hospital pass there.
Yeah.
And given that we got that ball back after a sort of uncontested drop ball after an injury, there was absolutely no reason for Walker-Peters to pass that ball backwards. And I don't think anybody other than him was expecting that to happen. So he just caught everybody completely on the hop and got away with it, obviously. But that, I mean, the big one was was that cross in the 95th minute, where I guess you might have if you're being really generous, you might say that him kind of coming for it and flapping at it has probably put Suter off a little bit. Because all he's got to do is nod it downwards, or at least slightly more downwards than he has, and Leicester get an equaliser. And then all of a sudden you're pointing fingers, and it's an absolute disaster. But again, we rode our luck. We got away with it. Other weeks we haven't done, and it's you take the rough with the smooth. I think he's been slightly better the last few games. He's not looked. I mean, obviously the goal last week at Leeds was poor from both him and Bednarek, but he's not looked like, basically, if you hit anything at him, it's just going to go in regardless of the pace or the direction. He's come for crosses and taken stuff. His distribution has been okay. And there actually does look as if there's a bit more communication going on between him and the defenders. One thing I noticed as well from that shanked clearance that Iheanacho put over was that rather than what he's been doing in the previous 18 months, 2 years or so, Bednarek was actually encouraging when he then went back,
went over and high five.
He went back to Bazunu and said, "No, it's fine. Keep your head up, sort of get on with it, sort of blank it out of your memory. It's gone." Whereas in the past he'd have been all over him and making the kid feel 3 inches tall.
Yeah.
So that's an improvement already. So yeah, I mean, it's at the end of the day, realistically, given the performances we've seen, and the change hasn't been made, I find it very difficult to believe McCarthy's playing again this season, really.
Yeah. I was going to ask Jacob about that just before we get on to the Grimsby game. Obviously, Ruben Sellers was talking about his core of 7 or 8 players starting each week. Do you think we're starting to finally see that now? Do you think in his head he's got his best 11, and obviously Bazunu's going to be part of that?
I think so. I wouldn't be so sure Bazunu will carry on playing, because I think Alex McCarthy had pretty terrible luck, untouched with the timings of his injury. He was going to come in for the game. I think it was before Brighton, so it's post Lincoln.
Nathan
Got
Jones'
injured.
first game, wasn't it? Was he going to
Yeah,
bring him back in because they knew each other, or they played together?
Yeah, he was going to bring him back in. Then he's supposed to come back in for the Blackpool Cup game. Had issues with his hip in terms of distribution in training, so that prolonged his injury. Then came back for Grimsby. Didn't really have much to do, and I think he hurt his shoulder when he was 1v1 in the second half for that Grimsby player. And I think if he came through Grimsby, okay, it was going to be set up for Alex McCarthy to come back into the team. Again, issues with his injury, and Bazunu carried on playing. He's probably played through that out of form patch, and you probably think, given he's now kept 2 clean sheets and 3, he's not in the worst form. I think you probably stick with him now because he's played through it. But yeah, I think there's been 2 opportunities this season where McCarthy would have undoubtedly come in. It's just whether he now makes a change after having that clean sheet.
Just a final word on booing players, Glenn, because this is absolute nonsense, right? I know we talked about Elyounoussi and not the best player, but when you're booing a player as he comes on, Bednarek's name getting read out, people booing, it's a strange situation we find ourselves in when that's happening at home and we're supposed to be getting behind the team.
Yeah, I mean, we're all critical. I'm critical in print. We're critical on here at times.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, maybe it's hypocritical to say, but it seems like you cross a line when you do it in the stadium, because at the end of the day, you're there to try and watch the 11 players representing your team do their best. And even if you don't think Elyounoussi, for example, is any good, how's it going to help him by booing him when his name's read out or when he comes on as a sub? It's I mean, Bednarek did have a little bit coming to him. But so I can kind of understand it the first game, but I think that's his 3rd home game now, and it's still happening. So yeah, I don't get it. It's but then people would argue that I've paid me money, I've got the right to do what I want, sort of thing. Well, yeah, but you're not really helping. So at the end of the day, it's up to individuals. But it surprises me. I mean, I think more people would think it's a bad thing than a good thing to be booing your players. So it surprised me that the amount, the number of people that have obviously jumped on this bandwagon. So I can't really say any more than that. I mean, I can't understand doing it in the stadium during the game or before the game. I really can't.
However, after the game and on Wednesday night, absolutely deserved. Humiliated in the FA Cup 5th round. League 2 Grimsby winning 2-1. Steve, was this a new low? A couple of penalties, goal ruled out, but I just felt afterwards that we couldn't have any complaints.
It was odd, wasn't it? I mean, I do think in the cold light of day, you replay that game 100 times and you win 99 times out of it, because we literally handed them 2 penalties. Through utterly brainless, not even defending. It wasn't even we were doing defensive things to cause penalties to be given away. We literally just, it's just like, what are we doing? Absolutely mental. Like I don't think there's a Grimsby player within 20 yards of Lianco when he's trying to head that cross away. And Gillette Assar, I mean, at the end of the day, he's probably actually proven Nathan Jones right. In many ways. Just defend first. You don't need to get involved in being a prat and giving this League One referee a decision to make on his big day, where at the end of the day you give him that opportunity, he's gonna take it with both hands. And I mean, the way their lad went down was absolutely pathetic, by the way. But if you give him that opportunity, and the ref only kind of sees it one way, then you're shooting yourself in the foot. But I mean, the thing is, let's be honest, Grimsby didn't get, other than those 2 penalties and one other shot, I don't think they got out their own half. But we were just too slow and too lethargic once we got into the final third. We had a spell of 20 minutes around where we got the 1 goal back, and Walcott had his equaliser disallowed, where all of a sudden we applied a bit of pressure at pace, and they couldn't handle it. And if that Walcott equaliser was had stood, we'd have won that game in 90 minutes
If
comfortably.
we were playing at their place, of course, there wouldn't have been VAR, would there?
Exactly.
So
Yep.
it would have been
That's
fine.
absurd.
That's
Yeah.
the magic.
So they wouldn't have had the first penalty, and they wouldn't have had, and the Walcott goal would have counted. But yeah, I mean that's a nonsense of the FA Cup sort of ruling, in that, I mean, the thing is, you get to this stage where you've only got 8 games going on. Surely you have enough resources to have the technology present at all the grounds. It shouldn't matter whether those grounds are Premier League grounds or if they're lower league. Like Sheffield United, they've played Premier League games with VAR at Bramall Lane. Burnley, they've played Premier League games at Turf Moor with VAR. They've got the capability and the technology already in place at those venues. There's absolutely no justification for VAR not, if you're going to use it, then you've got to use it in every game. It might be a case that you say, okay, we're going to use it from like the 5th round onwards, where you're into the last 16. There's only 8 games, and you're more than likely going to be playing most games at Premier League or at worst Championship grounds. But yeah, not having it at this stage of the competition is nonsense.
It's very strange. Jacob, obviously, I'm just trying to think about the positives from this. In a way, I kind of came away from that game thinking, actually, it might make the job easier for the manager, because I think if they'd have performed really well, he might have had a selection headache and he might have had some big decisions to make. But there was certainly absolutely nobody that played their way into his thoughts or his starting 11 after Wednesday night.
No, I think your outlook's certainly more wise than mine was at the time. I just thought it was a complete mess, and I think it probably, and I still think it now, that it was kind of indicative of the broader issues at Southampton in terms of the recruitment and how many misses they've had, and how everything's been kind of blurred, and there's not really been a clear vision between two ownership regimes. But we've made a big thing about this squad being too excessive, too bloated. 30 players. I think Southampton used the most players in the Premier League, along with Chelsea, and both teams to different extents haven't really got an identity or had it at that point. And you bring in these players. Ruben says made 9 changes. He probably said to these players, "Give it your all. This is maybe your last opportunity to shine at this season, maybe even in your time at Southampton." And I couldn't believe how poor they were. And I know everyone's like, always play your best team, and I understand that. But even still, you can't be losing to a League 2 team like that. I don't care who plays, how much of it is rotated, playing League 2 and having such a lack of energy. I know they did in spurts, but overall there wasn't really any dynamism. I thought everything looked so fallible, really, and I think you'll see that was the last chance for a lot of those players, and now it's we'll see what happens in the summer with them. But yeah, overall disappointing, because I sense it was a really good opportunity for a good cup run, especially with the draw opening up as well.
Is it a missed opportunity, Glenn, do you think, or would it have been a distraction? And actually, we just now know for sure that players like Lianco and maybe to a certain extent Sletosar and Orsic, they're not going to cut the mustard, and that's it now. Just put them in the B team.
It's a missed opportunity for the club. I was 7 years old when we last won a proper trophy. Now, I'm not saying we'd have gone on and won, but at the end of the day, we had a 5th round game against the team 16th in League 2. And it was pathetic for all the reasons that Steve and Jacob have said already. The whole game had an element of Mickey Mouse about it, down to the referee. Now, on both the penalty decisions, he gave the benefit of every doubt that there was about it to Grimsby, didn't he? And the first one, I'd love to know why it took 5 minutes.
Oh, it was awful, wasn't it?
For the VAR decision, because their winger clearly threw the ball down the line before he crossed it, before Lianco handballed it. The only theory I've got is perhaps that they didn't know the rules, because I think if the cross had been smashed into the net by a Grimsby player, it probably would have been disallowed because it was directly responsible for the goal. But because it ended in a penalty, maybe there's a grey area there. Maybe they didn't know the rules, because the handball by Lianco was absolutely clear. That's one view. He's obviously handled that, give a penalty. So
I called that from about 120 yards away.
Yeah, because you can tell by the way the ball kind of slows down There's certain softness about the touch, isn't there, and the way it kind of drops down. So so no problem with that being given for the handball, but why the winger's handball wasn't? And so the referees basically missed 2 handballs. So he was Mickey Mouse, and he couldn't wait to give the second penalty. And at the end of the day, Chiletazars flicked him. But the way that scenario should have ended was the referee just saying, "Pack it in, lads. There's a yellow card each." But there you go. Lost the game. It's a missed chance for the club and the supporters. Does it help the league program? Not convinced, to be honest. And the thing that annoys me about it is, it is allegedly top level sport that we're playing. And to me, if you get paid by a football club, that entitles you to train, and anything else should be earned. Your minutes on the pitch in whatever competition, it should be earned. And that starting lineup, I mean, I can't understand why Sulemana and Onuachu weren't on the bench in case they were injured. I mean, and so when the front players were a disaster, we ended up bringing on Joe Aribo, who we knew was going to be a disaster. He's been a disaster ever since the preseason friendly when he scored that good goal. It's strange to me that we kind of. I agree with Jacob. Ruben Sellers probably thought I could put out any 11. And I don't think we underestimated Grimsby. I think we underestimated quite how bad some of our squad players are, and that's why we ended up with the result we did. I mean, the caveat to all that is that I don't see what goes on in training, nor does anyone. So maybe Joe Aribo and he's brilliant in training, so he earned his chance. I don't know, but I think it was a missed opportunity, definitely. But if it acts as the impetus for everyone to learn some hard truths and some tough decisions to be made, then it's probably a good thing.
We'll take something from it. Well, the league games come thick and fast now. There's never really a good time to visit Old Trafford, Steve. This United team seem to have found a bit of form, but they're going to be a bit wounded after that Liverpool result. So they're going to be out for a backlash, aren't they? It could be a tough Sunday afternoon.
Well, I'm kind of hoping that the backlash is faced by Real Betis on Thursday in the Europa League. But yeah, we'll see how that pans out, because I'd imagine Ten Hag will take that quite seriously, especially the first leg on Thursday. So it'll be more or less full strength United team for that one, and he will think that if he needs to, he can rotate a few sort of slightly fringe players, because he's been getting a lot out of those sort of occasional players this season. Your likes of Garnacho and even Anthony's not really been ever present, but he's contributed in sort of fits and starts. But yeah, I mean, he will be demanding a reaction because good Lord, they were absolutely pathetic in the second half this afternoon. It was, I mean, Bruno Fernandes should have been sent off probably twice. He's barged into the linesman, which, I mean, if you're a grassroots official, you're watching that and you're thinking, well, I mean, I've just got no chance here.
Any chance for a retrospective ban?
I wouldn't have thought so. That would involve the Premier League or the FA or PGMOL, whoever should be taking responsibility for this sort of thing, actually having a backbone. But they won't do. So no, I wouldn't have thought so. But yeah, I mean, he was awful, and for the guy who's wearing the captain's armband. I mean, I'm not big on this whole, the captain's got to show sort of outward leadership and be the guy that's getting into people when you need to sort of raise your game. But you've at least got to lead by example in some aspect. And his way of leading by example was basically just not bothering to run for the last 20 minutes unless he could get into an argument with someone, which was quite extraordinary. But they will, you would imagine they can't possibly play as bad as they did again on Sunday. And I mean, in front of a home crowd as well, where there'll be obviously a heightened level of expectation, especially against a side like us, where we're struggling at the wrong end of the table. I mean, they've run into Liverpool at a bad time for them, where Liverpool have just suddenly turned it on again, kind of rediscovered that sort of form from 2 years ago, where they could put in that sort of performance a little bit more regularly. But at the end of the day, they're still a good side. Ten Hag's, other than like some really weird sort of massive away defeats. I mean, they got battered at Brentford, didn't they, early in the season? City stuck 6 past them, I think, was it 6-3? And they've obviously done 7 this evening. So away from home, there's still a bit of a question mark on them in certain environments, but at home they've been pretty consistent and pretty good all season. So yeah, I'm not expecting an awful lot from this one. Just get out of it with goal difference intact, I think.
It's not been a happy hunting ground in recent years, I don't think, Jacob, unless I'm forgetting any really good results we've had up there. Do we stick with the same 11 they won at the weekend? Have they earned the chance to start, or do you think he'll set up very differently for this one?
I think he'll change. I think last year, didn't Ralph go for the same team that after the game before that and got a 1-1? But I think Southampton played quite well that day as well, from what I gather. So yeah, Southampton, I think bar the 9-0, they've been okay at Old Trafford.
Since Fergie retired, our record there's actually all right.
Yeah, I think there will be a few changes. I'd like to see Romain Perraud come back, and I think Maitland-Niles have been good, but I just think Perraud defends with a little bit more intensity. And I think when you're against wingers that are direct, especially you saw Maitland-Niles at Leeds, he struggled. I think Perraud's probably up to the task a little bit more, but Southampton need to keep hold of the ball a lot better, and he needs someone to carry them up the pitch. And I think Walcott and Sulemana have been good, but I wouldn't mind seeing Stuart Armstrong back in there just to drive the team back up the pitch, carry the ball, a bit of experience as well. I think he's one of the few players that can hold the ball and allow the rest of the team to get into shape. So I wouldn't mind seeing that. So yeah, there's certainly a few options on there, and yeah, I think it's going to be a difficult one. But I'm actually more concerned now after Man United losing 7-0, which is ironic.
I was the same. Yeah, I felt the same as I had that 7th goal go in. Glenn, this is going to be a proper test for Ruben Sellers, isn't it? If we give them as many chances as Leicester, we're not going to get away with that.
No, we're not. Which is why I'd like to see the defence rejigged. I'd like to see a balanced defence. The thought of Maitland-Niles playing against Rashford is a little bit scary. So I'd prefer Kyle Walker-Peters to be over that side. I'd be tempted to bring Salisu in as well, just to balance things up. If he's 100% fit, I don't know if he is 100% fit. Alcaraz, obviously, we haven't mentioned that. The idiot went and injured himself doing a knee slide yesterday, so we don't know. We don't know how bad that is. Obviously, his fitness is going to be key. And that'd be interesting to see if he plays the same role that he played yesterday. I know, Man United have got Casemiro, who's obviously a fantastic player, but he seems to have been playing a little bit further forward. So Manchester United still seem to have a bit of a gap between the defence and the midfield that maybe we could exploit. And it'll be interesting to see if Tall Paul gets a go against Lisandro Martinez.
Yeah, it's been missing in action the last couple of. He wasn't in the squad, was he?
Yeah, and again, it's surprising he didn't play against Grimsby. Bearing in mind he didn't play yesterday, so I think we've got enough to give them a few problems. I don't really think the 7-0 makes a huge difference. And if Man United can get beat 7-0 at any time, I'll take it. I think it's hilarious. I just think it's really funny because there's been a lot of rubbish said about Ten Hag, and hasn't he been marvellous and all that. They already had a ridiculously expensive squad, and he spent about 220 million. So yeah, well played. And they're undoubtedly better than what they were. And Marcus Rashford's form since the World Cup has been incredible. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how we go. Is it the sort of game where we try and sort of, we need to create some chances. We can't just sit back against them. And but can we cause them enough problems? If we're still in the game after the hour, after an hour, what do we do?
When Mara and Armstrong come on?
Yeah, okay. to you. We'll see what happens there. But I'm actually looking forward to it. It's these games, it's a free hit. But
yeah,
I'm getting beat today, it shows they're human. If you'd have asked me before today, I'd have said this is probably the most difficult game you could possibly have right now. But having got beat 7-0, I think it's obviously taken a bit of the air of invincibility away. So so why not? Let's get out there and have a go.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask the three of you for some score predictions. If you're watching the live stream on a Sunday night, then you can leave those in the comments as well. Let's see what you think. Now, Glen, Jacob, and actually Alfie all predicted the win against Leicester. So, Glen, I'm going to come to you first for the Man United one. I just can't see us getting anything. I think we'll be lucky to get away 3-0 because I think we're going to struggle a bit. What about you, Glen? What do you think?
I'd love to know what I predicted when we lost 9-0.
We could probably find that
out. Man United away. It's too much to hope to get anything from the game in terms of getting a point. So I will go a 3-1 defeat.
3-1. Jacob, I'll come to you next.
I was going to go for a 3-0 defeat as well. I think Man United will get an early goal and then Southampton will keep it fairly respectable, but ultimately get exploited on the counter as well.
And Steve, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, they might be tired from Thursday, but they've got a massive squad with loads of depth.
We need them to be very tired.
Yes. So yeah, I'm not, as I say, not expecting a huge amount from this. Get out of it with goal difference vaguely intact. 2-0, I think.
2-0. Right. Okay. Great. Just a word on the women's game. Ladies team back in action today. Excuse me, back in action today. I know you caught the last 15 minutes, Steve, but defeat at Charlton.
Yeah, so obviously they played Charlton opening game of the season, and were given a bit of a lesson really as to the step up in that opening game. They're beaten pretty soundly 2-0. Today you kind of hoped that, having had a pretty good season, I think everyone will probably agree that today was an opportunity to show that they've learned and they've stepped up a little bit. But unfortunately, in I think Marianne Spacey's words, it was a subpar performance. Just disappointing 1-0 defeat. It was an early goal, but certainly from the sort of 15 minutes or so I caught at the end of the game, we had a fair amount on the ball, but didn't really do an awful lot with it. Late free kick that fired just over the bar, but we've not tested the keeper at all there. Just disappointing.
The league looks like it's pretty much sealed up anyway, doesn't it?
Yeah. With again, same issues we had last season in that only one team goes up.
Yeah, and they're 10 points ahead.
Bristol City are now 10 points clear of us. London City Lionesses lost at home to Sheffield United, I think. So we're still in touch with them in second, but you get nothing for finishing second in this division. Unfortunately, it's one up and that's it. And it looks increasingly likely that's going to be Bristol City at the moment, barring a late season collapse.
Well, on that note, that's pretty much it for this week's episode. Don't forget you can follow Total Saints Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. We are at Total Saints Pod. The website is totalsaints.co.uk. There's a link on there to our online shop as well. We're also on Patreon. That's where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. Patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast is the address that you need. There's different tiers on there, all ranging from £5 up to £20 a month. And each of the tiers comes with its own perks, including some weekly shouts for those patrons in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tier. So thank you to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Matt Hall and Andy Hollis in the Francis Benali tier, and also Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Matt Rose and Nick Reed in the Mick Shannon tier. Cheers, Steve. Thank you, Glenn. Thanks, Jacob. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your comments, and we'll see you again next week.